by Sony. The principle of Twilight Football was to have 7 games of football in 7 stunning locations around the world at twilight. And that was the launch page on our website for it. So in terms of principles, what we needed to do was to use our conventional media and social media to build a campaign that would allow us to punch our weight over and above that of a conventional campaign. Like most of us at the moment, we were facing budget cuts and restrictions, and so a conventional ad campaign was out of the question. What we had to do was to deliver a PR-led campaign that would achieve the same results. We also were planning to use what we call smarter media to extend the duration of the campaign, and more of that in a moment. And we were then going to use all of our media touch points, both online, offline, email and so on, in order to reach our stakeholders and to recruit the people to play these games of football. Because what we wanted to do was to create recruit normal people to come and play these games of football in wonderful locations, to compete, to enter, and we then wanted to recruit people to come and use Sony cameras to record the games of football. The idea being that you end up with a documentary type activity at the end. So we were going to need to recruit 110 players, 27 documenters, and then 6 Twilight Hunters, as we called them. So just a word on smarter media. Conventionally, when we looked at our consumer journey, we were finding that when we did a conventional campaign, we issued a press release, it got an awful lot of coverage, and then after 2 weeks, the amount of coverage deteriorated and reverted back to the pre-announcement level, which meant that we were only reaching a very small percentage of our target audience, because the customer journey for electronics is reasonably short. So what we've done, we've taken a rather broader approach, which we call smarter media, and we try and extend the duration of the coverage for any run campaign, starting before we put the press release out and extending to about 12 weeks in total. That way we get about 20% of our target audience rather than 3% of our target audience. Now it's a little more sophisticated than that, but that's the general idea. If we translate that to the Twilight Football campaign, we effectively had 3 phases. The first phase was the recruitment phase, which would be led by PR. The second phase is the event phase, which is PR and marketing. And then the third phase, which is the celebration part, which comes after the events, which is led by sales, primarily marketing and indeed some PR. So already we have a campaign that runs, in this case, for about 6 to 8 months.
So that came in January. Earlier, towards the end of last year, when I was talking to my colleagues in marketing about what we were going to do with the ad, I got very uncomfortable with the notion that we were going to make this a kind of online phenomenon. We were going to accelerate this by using PR. It's always a worry when someone says you've got a PR ad, because it doesn't really work unless it's something quite spectacular. And actually, interestingly, at the time we were talking about the Cadbury's Gorilla ad as something which had become a kind of a YouTube thing. And that was kind of a benchmark, a kind of unofficial benchmark before the ad came out. And in fact, Cadbury's Gorilla had 5 million views in its first 12 months online. And in fact, our ad did get 6.5 million hits in the first 12 weeks. I'm not saying it's a better ad, and I think actually it's kind of 18 months down the line and online had evolved, so ads were going to get more hits anyway. But so I think it probably did meet the benchmark we were looking for. But anyway, we went ahead with what we wanted to do on the basis that it didn't matter how good the ad was, we were going to try and make this work, and that was the only way we could do. In fact, the ad it was very popular, and it did win a gold award at the Cannes Lions Advertising Awards, which is obviously quite prestigious worldwide awards, and actually was just pipped to the post, second place in the campaign most likely to change the advertising industry by Barack Obama's election campaign. And I'm not just kind of showing off for T-Mobile raises, but I think it is quite interesting that it was beaten by something which was all about online. Barack Obama's election campaign is known as kind of the YouTube, Twitter, Facebook campaign. It was, politics meets online in the most telling way, never before and never since repeated, although I'm sure it will be repeated. Anyway, so what did we do with the ad? The first thing we did was think, okay, well, internally there ought to be an opportunity here, so not just the outside world, what we do with our own staff. So we invited people to compete, to take part in the ad, to actually dance in the ad. And I think we had 5 or 6 people in the end who won the competition. The competition was, we set up karaoke booths we're 6,000 people in the UK, 4,000 in 3 call centres around the UK and another couple of thousand in a head office. Karaoke booths around the country in the different offices. So people did their own songs, karaoke songs. We had our own little corporate YouTube site, a little extranet where people could upload stuff, and the best ones won. I won't go into it in more detail, but it was great. People were really engaged and enjoyed it.
That channel will be stumbled upon eventually. Audience building is easier. In a world with infinite channels, a web-enabled world, there's no guarantee anybody's ever going to find anything you do. One of the things that I really liked that Nick talked about was the importance of finding media partners. And that's crucial because your website always starts with an audience of 0. Everything you do in the social media, digital media space starts with no audience unless you account for it. If you're going to make a new Twitter account for your campaign, it starts with 0 followers. And one of the things we need to address as we sell digital to clients is creating an expectation that we're going to have to work to build an audience from scratch or borrow someone else's audience by using a media partner. Good digital PR is always on. All right, I use Southwest Airlines here as an example. I think that's a sensational brand. They're a regional carrier in the United States, and they make it possible for the consumers to connect with them any way they choose. They've got a Facebook group, they have a Twitter account, they have a blog. It generates a lot of organic coverage on the web, and they get talked about in a way that punches above their weight. They're a much smaller carrier than, say, BA or American Airlines. But their share of voice in the digital space far outstrips those because they're engaging. These are the challenges I really want to get into the nitty-gritty with you. First off, we need to talk about the uncertainty of measuring ROI in the digital space. That's something that clients worry about, and rightly so, all the time. And if there's one strong barrier remaining to having every client on board to understanding the value of digital and social media, it's how do I measure success here? How do I measure my return on investment? We also have to get away from, and this has already been brought up a couple of times, we have to get away from the digital engagement is free mentality, right? The audience building that we were talking about is not free. Social media is not fairy dust that we can sprinkle onto a campaign to make it successful. It does require a lot of hard work. Secondly is the campaign-to-campaign structure. The way that we're institutionally set up to do communications is not really suited to the social media environment.